In January, food inflation rose 0.4% from a month ago and 2.5% from a year ago. Food at home rose by 0.5%, while food away from home rose just 0.2%. Here to help break down these numbers and what it all means for consumers, we've got Katie Thomas, who's the Kearney Consumer Institute lead. Katie, great to have you here with us. So, did this hotter than expected report take you by surprise at all?
I can't say it took me by surprise, but it's certainly concerning. Just a month ago, I was praising the stability, if not the adaptability, of the US consumer. So, despite voiced broad concerns about the economy, they were really coping. So, either their wages had kept up with inflation, or they were kind of figuring out how to make small modifications to their cost of living to roll with it. Now, seeing these persisting price increases and then some of the other uncertainty that sort of flooded the market in the last month or so, I'm a lot more concerned about consumer spending going forward.
And so, with all of this in mind, as you think about some of the pockets where we saw indexes increase versus decrease, which jumped out to you the most?
I think one of the things I'm looking at is personal job security. So that's something we see to be a pretty good indicator of how people's appetite to spend and how they want to get out there in the market. So when you think of something like, 3.3 million Americans work for the federal government, and there's been a lot of confusion there around the future of their job. We've heard rumblings of tech layoffs and some other areas, and just, the challenges that may develop from tariffs or other things that may be implicated. So I think that's the biggest thing where we're just going to see consumers want to hold off until the dust settles a little and have a better sense of their own job security and how that informs their spending behavior.
As we've kind of continued to pour through some of the stats from the report here today, I wonder where this kind of marries up to the consumer sentiment and the consumer confidence picture and what we've already seen there.
Yeah, so again, when we ran our consumer sentiment in January, it was still looking pretty good. And then Michigan just released their numbers earlier this week, and they're seeing a bit of a downturn. So you are seeing some of those concerns of consumers just not knowing. It's really like I keep going back to that uncertainty. So we've been living in a little bit of an odd sense of uncertainty, frankly, since the pandemic and then going into what will the election results be. But now all of that is much more real. And so it just means that, consumer sentiment, it's going to suffer while they're uncertain. But we do find that the best indicator is actually how they feel about their own personal circumstances. So something that's happened within the last few years is there's a lot of voiced concern about the economy and the inflation in general. Then if you talk to them about their own personal, am I, still buying what I want to buy? Am I making the necessary adjustments? Most people are actually saying, yes, I am. So it's really going to be about watching some of those personal numbers and if they start to shift.
And so that's so interesting here because we used to use groceries as that barometer for where consumers and the health of the consumer was. Has that barometer changed?
Yeah, so what we're seeing with grocery is frankly just the optionality that has been created. Again, maybe since the pandemic, it's a little bit of everything, right? It's as we buy more online, we're able to price better online. There's just more options out there, whether it's individual brands at the store itself or retailers. So we think of the growth of Aldi, dollar stores, or think of Walmart and how they've expanded some of their actual like higher end products, which have gotten more higher income folks into the store. And so we see consumers are really actually quite savvy in their ability to optimize how they spend on grocery because they want to enable their fun spend, whether that's makeup, travel, any of those, areas of fun.
What is the best way that consumers reading through a report like this can really make sure that they're offsetting inflation in their more cyclical weekly purchases?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as a consumer myself right now, what I would still professionally recommend is it probably is a good time to just hold off and press pause for a minute. So as you talked about with the numbers, we're seeing everything from housing and shelter numbers go up, grocery numbers, travel. So it's probably a good time to really evaluate, like, is this a good time? It's winter. Maybe I can just really modify make sure I'm getting the best deals, take that extra time to do the price shopping, looking for the good sales, and just wait a little bit till some of the political dust settles and we have a better sense of what the actual implications of some of these changes may be, and can really adapt to them more in real time.
That's really interesting, and perhaps we'll end on this question, which is a lot of consumers are trying to weigh what the potential effects of tariffs might look like as it pertains to their regular purchases here. Where are some of the first places where that has shown up in the past, or what the anticipations are seeming like from consumers?
Sure. So I think, one of the ones we're tracking most closely right now is the de minimis exemption and some of the tariffs from China. So as we know, consumers have really loved Temu, Shein, some of those types of brands, and that's something where they could see it the most immediately. So that's certainly an area to determine, what the interest level is there, if that's something that you can maybe buy elsewhere, just hold off on for now. And then beyond that, it's going to be food and energy prices. So some of that we already saw in the numbers today. That's going to be some of the food we import from countries or, enabling from other surrounding areas. And then lastly, one thing I will say I'm thinking about going out and buying is getting an iPhone. So I'm due for an upgrade as we think about chips and some of those other things that, again, are pretty highly imported, chips and parts. That's another not a bad area to consider getting into them later.
Yeah, that's some good advice there, Katie, and waving the red flag on fast fashion potentially there as well here. We will see. Thank you so much for taking the time, Katie.
Thanks, Fred.